Hi, I'm nutritional biochemist Dr. Sean Talbot, and thanks for watching this mini documentary about stress and obesity. In 2008, I produced a film called Killer at Large, which examined the underlying causes of the obesity epidemic. Killer at Large went on to be named the best documentary at a number of film festivals, and has since been invited for screenings on college campuses around the country and at international film festivals around the world. We're all very pleased with the critical acclaim that the film has received, but we're even more pleased about the thousands of people that Killer at Large has been able to educate and motivate about what they can do to stem the rise of obesity in themselves, in their schools, and in their communities. You're watching a special edition of Killer at Large that we call a Focus. In each Focus, we stitch together a series of footage and extended expert interviews within a single topic area. This one being about stress as an important and underappreciated aspect underlying the obesity epidemic. As a nutritionist and as a researcher who studies the impact of our internal biochemistry on how we feel and how we perform and even how we look, I knew that the film would be covering a lot of ground. There are a lot of reasons for the obesity epidemic. As you might imagine, the film looked at different aspects of diet and exercise patterns, at issues involving food and advertising and marketing, and even at factors such as government food policy. What I didn't fully appreciate at the time, however, was the widespread understanding among other researchers, not just myself, of the impact of stress on our ability to gain or lose weight. This idea that stress makes us fat is something that I've written about in the past and is just now gaining widespread public acceptance. There's certainly an evolutionary aspect to the stress-obesity relationship, and also a stress-induced change in appetite and a stress-induced change in how and where we store body fat. The list goes on and on. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves in discussing the ways in which stress impacts our bodies, let's start with understanding how our biology evolved over millions of years. And I think the film did a great job of that. Take a look.
The fact is that human beings are at the cusp of an evolutionary disaster.
Humans have been on Earth for about 4 million years, and during almost all that time they've not had enough food. And so the evolutionary advantage is always conferred upon those people who are good at food acquisition and food consumption and in developing ways of storing food. And that's advantageous in a world where there's an insufficient supply of food.
There's an unbelievable shift in the dynamics of the relationship between food and the effort to get it. Remember, we're hunters-gatherers, and catching any animal's not easy. You have to run for dinner.
Hunter-gatherers are very busy folks, and they spend just about all of their daylight hours in activities that are directly related to getting that day's food. And the thing is, most of foods in the natural environment are not calorically dense. They are very low in calories per unit mass. And so when a hunter-gatherer encounters a rich package of nutrients, they are programmed to eat as much of it as they can because it's so rare. The natural selection couldn't possibly have ever envisioned a situation in which a human being would need to cut down on their fat intake. There was never so much fat out there that we needed to evolve any mechanism to say, hey, you've had enough fat for today, cut it out.
Human beings have no real way of turning off their food desire.
There's two things that have allowed humans to thrive over the course of our whole evolution. The fact that we want to have sex all the time and we want to eat all the time. To think that we can just say, I'm not going to listen to this signal is overly simplistic. To think that we can just suppress those signals and not be hungry and not have these other urges that have allowed us to procreate, it's too simplistic. So it's a very, very strong drive. It's one of the problems that I have with people who talk about obesity is that they'll say, It's simply an issue of willpower. All that person needs to do is put down the cheeseburger. All that person needs to do is not eat as many ice cream sundaes. It's not that simple. And stress is one of the most powerful appetite signals that we know about.
It would be very much like a group of church people saying, no, you shouldn't do sex. Well, people will do sex, and they will eat.
Basically, we're just rather clever, intelligent apes in terms of our basic biology. We have a larger brain for our body size than an ape does for its body size. But just generally, in terms of our morphology and our physiology, we're very, very similar. So it isn't so much that our biology changed in any way. It's just that we entered a new type of dietary niche that's strongly dependent on culture and cooperation to obtain food, rather than every ape for his or herself.
Those of us who are interested in obesity have to, I think, understand that the victim, the average person that eats too much, is really struggling with something of historic proportions. It's not that they have no self-discipline, it's that we're in the wrong place at the wrong time as a species.
Isn't that great? You can see from that segment that humans evolved to become really good at eating and storing lots of calories. Only now in our modern world, where we have fast food joints on every corner, does this evolutionary advantage become a disadvantage in terms of our risk for obesity and diabetes and heart disease. Our brains have become so good at seeking out high-calorie foods that we often don't even realize what we're doing, and it's making us fat. In the next segment, you'll hear from Dr. Mary Dahlman and some of the world's top scientific experts who explain how the relationship between stress and obesity basically means that our lifestyle, our stress, determines in large part how we behave, what we eat, and how that food makes us feel, good or bad, and how all of that can develop into a habit that's nearly impossible to break.
As a species, humans adapt to their environments, and a lot of what happens is below the level of our conscious awareness. And so oftentimes the things that we do automatically. We don't even realize it.
When we talk about what caused the obesity epidemic, there are many factors. Part of what I find fascinating is how people want to just grossly oversimplify this.
All we have to do is have people eat less and exercise more. Not a very big problem.
And have their pet little theories about what it is, or a really simple equation.
The rise of obesity can be parallel with the rise of the Golden Arches and all the other fast food companies.
There are a lot of complex factors involved here. Genetics, social factors, a whole variety of factors that have to do with diet, exercise, and so forth. And then part of it has to do with stress patterns.
We know from the scientific evidence that the stress piece of the puzzle is as important as the diet piece, and that's as important as the exercise piece. But all we hear about from the public health officials is eat less, exercise more, and that is clearly not working.
One reaction to stress is cravings for food. That's a very common response that's well documented in all sorts of different ways. If you are under stress, whether it's caused by your economic circumstances, your job, or some kind of weird diet that you're on, a likely outcome is that you're going to have cravings, you may engage in binge eating, and all of those sorts of things that are then going to be self-defeating in their own way.
Grabbing a handful of potato chips when you come in from your stressful job, hitting the drive-through because you just got out of traffic on the highway, all of that makes us feel great. There's some biochemistry to that. When I try to educate people about how important the stress control piece is, I try to explain to them, hey, your stress drives biochemistry that makes you hungry and makes you want to store fat. That same biochemistry works the opposite way. When you respond to those signals and you eat the fat and you eat the sugar, your body makes you feel great and rewards you. Hey, you just gave in to this biochemical signal. You just listened to your body. That's what fast food is. That's what processed food is. You're listening to the signals your body is giving off. It's not so much the marketing. Biology, in my mind, trumps marketing. We're stressed out. We are seeking out fast food. We are seeking out processed food. We are seeking out that kind of junk food from a biological perspective. Not because McDonald's is telling us, not because Kraft Foods is telling us, but because our own biochemistry inside of our bodies is telling us that's what we're hungry for.
It made you feel better to eat something sweet when you were stressed, and then you come back another day and your hormones don't have to be up, but you remember that you felt stressed, ate something sweet, and felt better. As a habit, if you don't feel so good, you may pick up something that's sweet that you don't need and think you'll feel better. So it's sort of a vicious circle. If you form the habit, then you keep it up, and habits are hard to break and have to be, sometimes you have to be taught to break them.
That last section outlines some examples of how biochemistry drives emotions and how emotions drive biochemistry. Stress changes your hormone profile. Those hormones change your appetite. Your appetite makes you crave sweets and high-calorie foods, and those cravings drive you to eat more junk because it tastes good. If that weren't bad enough, this next section outlines how that junk food reinforces continued consumption because it further changes your biochemistry. Blood sugar levels change, dopamine levels change, a whole cascade of hormonal changes makes you feel great, at least for a short period of time, which makes you want to eat that junk again and again and again. Of course, we all know intellectually that eating this way isn't very good for our long-term health. But in many ways, we're powerless to resist that biochemical drive to eat and eat junk whenever we're stressed. In this next section, you'll hear more about how stress changes not only your appetite for certain foods, but also how stress encourages our bodies to store more calories and eventually makes us fatter and fatter. When you're under stress, your body really dials itself back. Your metabolism goes down and you get into a storage state where your body is thinking that you're under famine conditions, and so you don't burn the fat.
There's a very interesting connection between cortisol, which is made by our adrenal glands, and obesity. Back in 25 years ago, the investigators in Sweden noted a correlation between stress and obesity. The more stressed you are, the fatter you get. And they found particularly that it caused you to make fat inside the abdominal cavity, what we call visceral fat. That's the fat that's associated with diabetes and hypertension and a lot of bad things that are associated with obesity. And when they studied these people, they found that they did have more cortisol, that people who are constantly stressed turn on what we call the hypothalamic pituitary axis. The hypothalamus is a part of the brain. The pituitary gland is a little gland that hangs down from the brain, and it controls the adrenal glands. So when the brain is stressed, it makes hormones from the brain which go to the adrenal gland, make the adrenal gland make more cortisol. The cortisol makes you have more fat in your abdomen, so we're fatter.
So cortisol is telling our brain to eat, and it's telling our belly to store. And that makes perfect sense if you're expending energy in response to stress. But if our stress is from traffic jams and bills and deadlines and family issues, we're not expending any calories, but we're getting the very same eat-store signals from cortisol, and that's leading us to become fat. Pretty bad stuff. Stress makes us fat. But I think you're probably getting the idea that it's not just stress that's the problem, but the metabolic changes that stress causes that are the real problem. And you're right. In this last section, you'll see how psychological stress can impact your stress response and your internal biochemistry, and ultimately, how likely you are to gain weight. It's important to understand that it's not just big stress, like Hurricane Katrina or earthquakes in Haiti, that set off a stress response, but rather, it's what we might think of as the little stressors that we encounter every day. The bills, the traffic, the deadlines, the family issues that provide an almost endless source of what we call chronic stressors. It's this never-ending stream of chronic stress that leads to health problems like obesity. On a grand scale, this whole war on terror is the perfect recipe for making a population obese.
Murderous regimes dedicating to killing us, tyranny and terror, slaughtered thousands.
I think there's very little doubt that the culture of fear is involved in the obesity epidemic. I think the evidence is pretty clear about that.
Are your taxes going up?
These taxes will go up.
Something worse than a recession?
Introduce something into the population that makes every single person scared or concerned or stressed at a very low grade level. It's not something where you're hiding under your bed or you're closing the blinds every day. It's always in the back of your mind.
What we noticed when we were studying rats and their adrenal steroid, which is corticosterone, not cortisol, is that the rats, if they were given a choice of things to eat, would choose pleasurable foods. And pleasurable foods such as sucrose, 32% sucrose solution, which is in this can right here. It's very sweet. It's just about as sweet as a Coke, and is high calorie and sort of empty calorie, so that when you eat sucrose and or drink sucrose, you are likely to take it in and put it right into fat. Rats that don't have their cortisol don't drink much sucrose, but rats with increasing amounts of their corticosterone drink sucrose more and more as the corticosterone goes higher and higher. And we also found that was true for other sweet drinks like saccharin, no calories at all, and for fat. Without the corticosterone, the animals eat or drink very little of that high-calorie, very pleasurable food, or very pleasurable food in the case of saccharin. And with cortisol, they drink more. And so we asked with our rats whether if they were stressed and allowed to have high calories, their choice of high calories, whether they'd use the high calories because their stress hormones were high, and in fact they do. When they're stressed, they eat more calories in the form of sucrose or fat, and they in turn get fat. This hormone does more than make you want to eat. It seems to make you want to do what you're going to do more than you would have wanted to if you didn't have high levels of the hormone. So if you're a rat and your adrenal hormones go high, you'll, instead of running 4 kilometers a night, if you have a running wheel, you'll run 8. If you have a bottle of sucrose to drink, instead of drinking 10 milliliters of that sucrose, you'll drink 30. It makes you want more. Now, that actually is fairly important because it works in a very bad way in terms of general wanting behaviors. If you, for instance, are someone who takes drugs and you go through a 10-step program or a 12-step program and stop the drugs, and then have an unexpected stressor come in and activate the adrenocortical hormones, it's been shown that that is likely to prompt your going back on drugs. You want them again. And one of the things the adrenal steroids clearly do is increase the amount of dopamine that's transmitter that's secreted in the wanting part of the brain, the pleasure center, and it's probable that much of this wanting stuff comes from the action of the steroids on dopamine output in the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center.
Yeah, dieting in a lot of ways is another stress. So if you're stressed out by the traffic jam, and you're stressed out by your job, and you're stressed out by whatever it is that stresses you out, and then you decide, I need to get in shape, and you go on a diet, that diet is viewed by the body as a stress. And so the trick to really dieting the right way is cutting your calories just enough so you get a benefit, and increasing your exercise just enough so you get a benefit. In our clinic, what we end up telling people is to exercise less and eat more, because we get people who are coming in who are exercising like crazy and who are dieting like crazy, and they're not getting any results. They're not losing weight, and it's because they're stressing their body out too much. When you're under stress, your body really dials itself back. Your metabolism goes down, and you get into a storage state where your body is thinking that you're under famine conditions, and so you don't burn the fat. So we'll actually get people to dial it back a little bit, make it easier for them, and by controlling the stress, it actually helps their program work much better. I hope you're not too depressed or too stressed by what you've just seen. I want this information to educate you about the links between stress and obesity, but even more importantly, I want it to motivate you to do something about those links. So what can you do? We certainly can't avoid all the stress in our lives, and most people wouldn't want to. A little bit of stress is what makes life exciting, but what we want to do is achieve the right balance, and luckily, there are a number of ways you can do that. In many of my books and blogs and podcasts, I outline a variety of easy-to-implement lifestyle approaches that help to balance biochemistry, improve mood, and boost energy levels. And you can access all of this at my website, SeanTalbot.com. At that website, you can find out how restoring metabolic balance in your body can help you to feel better, perform better, and be better on many different levels. Thanks for watching.